In case you don't know me, these are some of the organizations I've been involved with. I also just want to talk really loud to make sure everybody is awake. Okay.
And then totally monitor this tone.
That's my introduction.
I'm Indra Kupferschmid. I'm apologizing right away for my heavy German accent this morning, but I think I lost all ability, you know what I mean. I'm a designer and professor for typography in Germany, in Saarbrücken. I'm also a consultant for a couple of companies, type companies like Fondro or WebType, and involved in classification and legibility stuff, but most of you will probably know that. But this is not what we're going to talk about the work you probably know, but about type record, our latest effort and why we're doing this. I got infected by this research bug or interest in type history while I was learning everything about type from Fritz Myers and read his book Counterpunch. But it got really serious that I stepped into or fell down every rabbit hole of type research when I was doing this Helvetica Forever book, or was asked to do this. And the research got more and more complex because my task was to research all the related typefaces of Helvetica, and like every day there was a new door opening to me and got really chaotic, but also I'm not really academic, although I'm working at a university. So I was responsible in this book for everything that is printed really small because I just wrote too much, and Axel Langer wrote this wonderful introductory essay, and that was a really good choice because he was actually an expert in Persian textile design and not typography. And I compared all the technology and how it influenced typeface design, and so I really learned how different versions of a typeface can be. But the problem was really that it was too much I found out, and there wasn't place for this in the book. So I was really happy when Nick was approaching me that I could do this site with him about Neuhaus Protest for Fondro. And I thought that, yes, finally I have a place where I can put all this information that didn't make it into the book, and we did comparisons about, like we showed the true roots of Neuhaus Protest and Helvetica and compared different versions, and also showed like how some of the old decisions still are visible in the digital files of today, like the units from the later linotype system are still in the Helvetica of today. But still there was so much we found on the way that wasn't really so crucial for that site, so I still didn't have any place to put all that information. Because it's really not as easy as maybe Spiekermann was mistaken here that Helvetica was never adapted. In fact, there are like thousands of versions of Helvetica out there, and they're all differing really greatly compared to like the poster version, the linotype version, the monotype version of it, the first digital versions, or all these phototype versions. And my recurring problem is just where to put all this information, because for me it's still valuable and interesting information I have on paper. I don't find anymore. I have these text files with timelines and related typeface, but they're totally unpractical, of course. And I think also that if I had a place where I could put all that, would also suggest even more research for me, because that is inevitable what is research leading to. So we built type record, or we had the idea to build type record.
Yeah. So there were and are quite a few existing resources that kind of collect information about typefaces and their history altogether. And we actually looked at a lot of them and thought about how we might be able to use these for our own projects. And for one reason or another, most of them, or I should say all of them, didn't really fit exactly what we wanted. We have a very kind of specific idea of what kind of information we want to store and how we want to store it and what we want the focus to be. And while there's other great sources, kind of going back to the mouse here. This book is kind of the grandfather of this project. It gathers all the metal typefaces from Germany in 1926, and it shows all the different foundries that cast them, all different sizes, but it's still pretty limited in that it just shows a small word. It doesn't have a whole lot of specifics. Also, it hasn't been updated since 1926, and we can't really edit that. Similarly, McNagroo's book, which is a huge influence, at least on me. I don't know about the journalists over here, but his book is great because he shows full alphabets, and he goes into a little more detail about the families and all the different castings and things like that. And then he also fills it with lots of anecdotes. But again, this is a kind of a static book that hasn't been updated. It's something that we would like to take information from and use it for our own research, but yeah, this is just kind of inspirational stuff. Many of you might know this book. Similar to the first book I showed, it compares a bunch of different typefaces with kind of key characters that help you identify them. But it doesn't really tell much about the history. Again, it's just a book, you can't change it. You know, there are several books, I can't talk about all of them. But then there's the digital world. So, as I mentioned on my introduction slide, I used to work for MyFonts, and MyFonts is really great in that it has so many. It's the largest collection of fonts anywhere, and they're all at least somewhat contextualized, and you can compare different versions and things like that. But really, the focus of MyFonts is to sell fonts. It's not necessarily a history site, and it doesn't have every font in the world, and there are quite a few that it doesn't, especially non-digital typefaces. Similarly, there's ATypI, which came pretty close to some of the ideas that we were thinking about, but ultimately ATypI is focused more at kind of a novice type user base. And we love Jason, Santa Maria, and all the people that work with him on it, but we decided in the end that they have a different kind of goal than what we're aiming for. I'm just trying to see if the images look so crunchy on the screen. Anyways. Then there are some other projects which are much smaller in scope, but very similar to what we're trying to achieve. So if you're familiar with the Rob Roy Kelly wood type collection, which was maintained by David Shields up until pretty recently, and it's a fairly large collection of wood type, but it's just wood type, and it's just one collection. But he's done a really great job of cataloging the type and then also researching which manufacturers made versions of each typeface, giving some kind of historical information behind each one. If you haven't seen this site, I would definitely check it out. There's other projects like this global type project, which many of you on the ATypI email list have probably heard about a few times. And the focus of the global type project, at least as far as we understood it, was much too heavily aimed on this idea of linking geography with typography. And I definitely think that's a really cool idea, but that's not really what we're interested in doing. It would be wrong to not mention Discogs. Discogs is not a type site at all. It's for mostly record collectors. But the idea behind Discogs is that it will list the discography of pretty much any band you could ever think of. But instead of just having one listing for each album, it has all the different pressings of that album. So here you can see, I think this is the cassette version of Master of Reality, as released in 1991. And it's really interesting because you'll notice that the track listing from the original version is slightly different from the cassette version, and maybe they're in a different order, and people put notes about smaller details that they've noticed and the differences between the different releases. And this is the kind of level of information that we would like to have for typefaces, and that we've been collecting for typefaces but haven't really had a place to put them. Another great thing about Discogs is it has a very well built kind of documentation system, and everything. You can tell they've really thought about everything and made it easy for people who don't quite understand the world of record collecting and all these details to learn about them, so they can properly enter their own information. So when we started thinking about what's the ideal way to store information about a typeface, there are so many different typefaces and so many different kinds of typefaces that it's almost impossible to choose any one structure that will fit all of them. So we tried to generalize as much as we could to get a structure that would house as many families as we could. So we basically break it down into 3 levels of specificity. There's the general family, style, and then a sort, which is, if you're a letterpress printer, that's a single piece of type. And we wanted to be able to record information down to that micro level of just a single piece of type. Going across, we wanted to be able to store kind of generic information about a family, which we will put it on this master level. And then all the different versions that were made by different foundries, we can have information, if there's any variation between versions, we can store it there. But even beyond that, we were thinking of how this might be a tool for people who have physical type collections, letterpress printers or type collectors, and how they could store information about a specific instance of that typeface. So they could say, how many characters it has, or what condition it's in, or where it's stored. They could use it to catalog their own collection. And so these are kind of the variables by default where these variables are defined in this kind of grid of specificity. And then you'll see the places with the dots are mostly inheriting information from higher up in the hierarchy. The way we built it, though, we can set these variables on any level. If we want to set the year further down in the hierarchy or higher up, or change the name on a lower level, it's kind of all fair game. But these are mostly how things get entered in the defaults for when we're entering stuff. So as you can see, the further down you get in the hierarchy or specificity, the more information you can have, but also most of it is usually inherited. So stuff that's usually inherited here would be gray. I don't know if you can see, yeah. So to give kind of a real world example, this is how the system might work with Palatino. Maybe I won't go through every single square. You can read them as I explain it, but in the top left, we have just a record that stores very general information about Palatino, maybe the designer and the original release date. Because if you're saying, that this version of Palatino was mastered by one person, it might be true for a version, but not true for another one. So most of the information that we're entering is starting on this top left corner, and then we're kind of filling in the specifics as we learn more and more about the typeface. Going down, you'll see an example of kind of how you might store information about a single sort or clip. And if you may not know that Palatino, in its original metal form, had some swash caps, which I think were really nice. But if you were just searching about Palatino on MyFonts or Typemedia or almost any other digital resource, you would have no way of knowing that. Not only that, but you wouldn't necessarily have any way of knowing which versions had the swash, which versions didn't.
There were 2 J swashes?
Yeah, the 2 J swashes, for example. So this is like, as you might be beginning to understand, you can really get down to very, very specific, all the way down to like, I'm holding this one single piece of metal type in my hand, and there's a record for it if I want there to be. I should also mention that there doesn't necessarily have to be a record for all these things. That would definitely drive us insane. But what I found is that as you start entering information, you get curious about all these variables. So these are kind of the usual things that we're entering and that the system helps us store. Some nice things that I like is that they're kind of default credits, so obvious things like the designer or the publisher and things like that. But if there's some credit that you want to add to the record that isn't part of that, you can just kind of enter a free-form thing. If you know who did the hinting, or you know who did the punch cutting, or the justifying, or whatever. And then the kicker for me, this next slide, is like what really makes type record my pet project, is that every single piece of information that you can put into the system, you can also put a citation next to it. And this is a huge deal for me because doing any kind of type research online, you inevitably end up going down rabbit holes of false information that don't really have any citation or credits or anything, and it's hard to know how true or reliable that information is. So this is like, this is at the core of what we're doing. We think you can't really have a documentation system that doesn't support citation. So I guess the next, we'll start showing how it works.
Yeah, to give you an idea of the visual representation of these records, and also don't fret. We are just as terrified by this project or overwhelmed like you are maybe. But the good thing, as Nick mentioned, is you don't have to fill out all the information or all these records if you don't have the information. And this actually is also with all these red bars is the edit mode. And if you're not signed in or hover over these fields, it's not displaying all the empty fields, and it's not displaying all the editing interfaces. Yes. Thanks. But this is like the yellow kind of pages are the master pages, and this would be a master page for Helvetica, where we store the original designer, the original art director in this case, the original publisher, and the initial release date. And then when you go down, like this is the center where you can navigate from to all the other versions. We have notes. We have internal notes for us, like for instance also that we have to verify the entries. This is further down. And then this area here is like an aggregated list of all the styles that were available for Helvetica but across versions. For instance, the initial releases didn't have any condensed or compressed style, but you can go to these kind of entries from here and find out what version had, you get more or less a search result list of what versions of Helvetica have compressed, designed by Matthew Carter. There's a list of all the versions that this typeface is available in. For instance, I just filled in some from, for instance, the Haas initial release, which was in 5 styles just. So if you open this this little arrow, you get a list of the styles, and you could go directly to the style entry, or you could just click on the family name and go to the family entry of that thing. It also indicates how many styles there are available in this version, but this might be just the entries that are available. You could also jump right to the instance of the family. For instance, my school has 2 styles of Helvetica available, the light version and the bold version, and it also already says what sizes, if it's physical type, what sizes it is in, but you can also just have generic size entries for scalable typefaces like prototype or digital typefaces. Then you have a list of related entries which are similar or almost alias to these designs. Like you could go to the entry for Neue Helvetica or other similar typefaces. You have footnotes that refer you to further reading, or this is DC also actually, and the footnotes indicate where this information is coming from. We will eventually also probably have a link to where you could get that typeface from, and what we are really careful to do is that we indicate whether we trust this information or where this information comes from. So we have a status like, this is public, this is not public, we're still working on this record, or it's probably verified or needs edits. Not on the site right now, but we will have discussion, the possibility to discuss all the entries so you can comment on something, but it's all the information will be moderated so that the information can also be kind of trusted. The blue sites or the blue pages are, it's not really viewable on the screen, sorry, but they indicate the version of a family, and then you already see you have many more credits, or the possibility to have many more credits. For instance, who expanded the design, like ATypI built on the Helvetica design for the Dental Foundry, even down to something like the material that typeface was made of, or the production tools that we used. But this is all information that could count for one family, and you could get more specific if you're talking about a particular style or even a particular size of that style. So you can add information like, what's the size, of course, what's the material it was cast from, maybe that it doesn't even have a name or a size and a point size, but it has a name like Roman or Mittel or something like this. You can also indicate what fonting scheme it was released in, or if it's a physical type, how heavy it is. And you see that all the information you specified on a higher level gets inherited and is currently displayed in gray. Then on this level you also get to the individual source entries, if there are any, so you can jump to the capital R of Helvetica and maybe learn about the previous versions of it when they designed it and something like this. And again, instances, and you can jump to other versions of that typeface, and the rest is more or less the same. The third level is the instance level. This would be, for instance, the Helvetica I have in my print shop in Saarbrücken. It's actually owned by Ulrich Kerker, though it's not owned by me. So you can also store something where you got that font from, if it's worn down, if it's brand new, in what case it is in the red case in that example. So you can be really, really specific, and when I see these pages you think like, oh my god, that's so much information, you will never ever gather this in 50 years or 100 years, but as I said, it's most users will probably just use the general entries, the master pages we have, and if these are kind of just connecting different entries and give you the possibility to save the information you happen to have at some place, then it's a good thing, because you don't have to fill out all the things. But if you happen to know who cast that typeface at some point in life, it's possible to store it here.
So this is just kind of another example. She showed you kind of from the top down, starting very general, and I'm going to give you an example of how we might use this coming from the other way. Pretty recently I randomly spent a day learning about Zapf-Dingbats, which was much more interesting than I thought it would be. And I was comparing the digital version that comes on Mac OS and with the original specimens that were in Upper and Lowercase magazine. And I noticed there were some glyphs, like this little Made in USA bug, that existed in the original version, but I couldn't find it anywhere in the digital version. It doesn't exist in the digital version, probably because it doesn't have a Unicode value. And there were plenty of other arrows and things like that. And so I started wondering, like, what other differences are existing in all the different versions of Zapf-Dingbats? And I noticed there's this really weird situation with the original Circle 2. The white one had a flat crossbar on the bottom. The black one had kind of a wavy one. The digital one that comes with Mac OS, they're both flat. But the digital version from Elsner and Flocka has both variations. And In fact, the version from Elter and Flocka includes all of the glyphs, including the printed in USA and all the other weird little arrows and blips and blops that Zap sets. And so I thought, like, okay, maybe this isn't the most interesting thing in the entire world, but it'd be cool if I could, put this information somewhere. So with the type record system that we have now, you can kind of start on the lower level with just a single glyph and create a record for that. And then as you enter information, it kind of automatically creates the master versions higher up in the hierarchy according to the information you put in. And this is less helpful. We probably will be doing less of this, but I just like the idea that I can, if I really want to, have a single record for a single glyph from a single version and have notes about what makes it interesting compared to other versions. So, against the wishes of our developer, Chris Lewis, who's sitting up front here, we're going to try to do a live demo. So right now the site is it's still in a private working mode, but I'll let Indra steer it.
Yeah, we thought we could present a further state of this, but it's you might guess it was more complicated than we thought, especially the inherited thing. But it actually works right now, and continuing on the topic of former, for instance, I could show you of how former or the former family or design idea could be stored in that database. You could start with something like the family master for former, and you see, this is like hovering over it makes it editable if you have editing rights. And you see that this is maybe also an acid test if there are 8 designers of a typeface, that's how it might look like. And you see behind the names, the little 1 and 2 is, for instance, the possibility of citation, like my source of information, the first one didn't include Ilio Negri, but this information comes from Alessandro Polizzi and his research, so he added that name, and you can see where the different information is coming from. Yeah, the rest is more or less the same. We have images, they are not as nicely displayed right now as we might want them in the future, so you can have a bigger view. Notes, internal notes, and then you see the styles of former that are available right now or in the future. There are these original names which are in italic, but there's also a version which is currently worked on, a digital version which added new styles. For instance, this style of former was not in the original version, but it is still in the list, and you can jump to that version. So there are currently 3 versions of former I know of. The original version from Nebbiolo, of course, you can see what styles it was available in, and you can jump right to those. There were, I thought, 2 styles of former available for line casting, but it's actually 4, so I have to add that, but I just learned that yesterday. And there's also going to be a digital version of former that Roger Black and David Johnson Ross are currently working on, and David added, for instance, a new, luckily, a new weight for it. So you're getting a preview of the digital version of former. There's also more. There's the loading, but you get the idea. So added to the design director of Alto Novarese now is Roger Black in that list, inherited from higher up from the family version. You could also always go back on this tree. So you see here, maybe you can see what is inherited is displayed in gray, and then what is added to this version, like David Johnson Ross and Roger Black, is displayed in black. This is like scalable or digital or open type. These are this might show you that you can add whatever tag you want to use, or you can have several formats or displayed on a different level. Yeah, I think this was about it, what I wanted to show. So you see we're still very much in the working process of that project. It's currently just Nick Sherman and me and our developer Chris Lewis. We have to thank a lot. Still thank we are continually filling in information now and testing it and building out the functionality of the site, and hope that we might have a public version open for beta testers in the next month. It will be publicly viewable, but we might have a smaller circle of contributors at first, so that we can trust the information that is in there and really have a more scientific or academic resource than other type databases that are online right now. And everything that will be added from the public will be monitored by this circle of contributors, so that we ensure this, or you saw that we have the verified information and not. We are currently preparing to put in the database of Hans Reichert. You might probably know, who has this very large collection of specimens and cross-linked a lot of these in a static database, if that can be static. But you learn a lot about different versions of common typefaces. And we're talking to collectors and partners like the Ballin Institute and the Robert Kelly Collection, as Nick already mentioned it. The next thing we want to build into the site that are not there already is, of course, several pages. We don't even have a homepage so much right now, but we're going to have a blog, or where we can put some essays or reports about our findings. The commenting function I mentioned already. We will open it maybe, or you have the possibility to also catalog more than just type. If you want to catalog your Matchrise collection or maybe later your books, this will hopefully be possible in the system. And what I'm really keen on is that you can compare entries, like really see what is different across entries, and also compare the images for that. So yeah, our thanks go out to our employers. My school and Fondro, where Chris Lewis and Nick Sherman are employed, and Chris Lewis again, of course. And thank you for your patience, and now we hope you have a lot of exciting questions for us.
Sometimes it's considered a sort of controversial theme, but I know some founders don't like this idea, but there have been sort of pamphlets published on occasion where the sort of the clones and rip-offs of various typefaces have been listed. So I'm thinking back into the 70s, where things like CompuGraphic published things like Vega and Helios and all these various versions at various levels of quality, sort of clones of Helvetica, for example. So would those be also searchable in this database?
Yeah, this is one of the largest ideas, to have a database so that you can cross-link those and jump and compare. Yeah.
And actually, stuff like that is a big part of the reason why we started this project, because we know about, especially phototype. The phototype era is just this kind of big gray area in the timeline of type history, and we'd like to have some way to start documenting that formally.
Thanks for the talk. Hello. My heart's racing after this talk. If I feel kind of frightened or what. Maybe it's a bit of a naive question, but the ambition of what you're doing is really impressive to me, and I do see a kind of like a model that follows the kind of the invention of the Oxford English Dictionary being kind of applied here, like this kind of user-based sort of collection of kind of specific information. Maybe my naive question is like, why do you? Well, I mean, there's another sort of site that kind of follows that model called Wikipedia, which we all know. And maybe my question is like, why, which I think much more people know about in the world. And my question maybe is like, why don't you spend your resources and time contributing to something like that? And so, I mean, I don't want to say that you're doing a bad thing, but or like, I mean, maybe it's a level of detail you can achieve in Wikipedia, but in a way this is, yeah.
We've actually talked quite a bit about this. When we were first discussing this, we thought of doing it as a media wiki kind of thing. And then we realized to make it the most useful for us, we needed to have this at least semi-formal structure where there were different levels of specificity. Whereas Wikipedia, it's just kind of one page and it's all in one, basically a long text file, and you can't, it's harder to separate metadata out. And what we're doing is basically all built around this idea of metadata. I mean, also another thing that's worth considering is the type pages that are on Wikipedia. I wouldn't consider them trustworthy, and I think people could make them trustworthy. People like us could make them trustworthy, but I would rather be working with a small group of people that I know and trust, and not having to argue with people who are claiming one thing instead of going through the Wikipedia system.
What do you think about sites like Luke? I always find his name like really hard to pronounce, like Luke Devoir.
I think he's in the audience here somewhere. He was at the conference. His site is great because it's just kind of like a mind dump, but there's also a lot of information on there that either doesn't have sources or is just straight up wrong. Like, I know there's information about me on his website that says I wrote this article about manicules that I didn't, and I probably should have written an email to tell him that, but I mean, like I said, a big part of this is being able to have citations and encourage citations and have at least somewhat more of an academic approach.
I'm really excited about this project. You talk about starting from a single source and having it kind of inherit all this stuff and sort of create the records for the family and that sort of thing. Is this system also equipped for if I have some type that I don't know a family name, that I just have a bunch of metal type that I found, or a printing specimen that doesn't have record of what it's a larger piece of? Is that a place to go?
Yeah, I mean, the only difference would be you just call it like untitled typeface or something like that, and hopefully, if we saw someone enter something like that, we'd say, oh, they don't know what this is, and maybe help them try to figure out what it actually is, so we can put it all in the context of everything else.
And you can later also connect different entries so that you can specify what parent this is or what the child is. So you can always, if you find the parent of that single sort later on, you can connect those two.
So I think I agree with you about the importance of having this as structured data rather than just kind of a big wiki page. And I think that raises a question about is there kind of plans for like an API or some way of getting kind of more raw access to the structure of the data?
Depend on where as I'm able to do this because Font Bureau allows me enough free time to work on it, and they're sympathetic. They're all type nerds, but they almost want to keep away from it because they know if there's any kind of commercial involvement, it kind of taints the information. But yeah, I love the idea of having an API where other people can do interesting stuff in the data. So
we already have some related fun projects like fonts in use that could definitely use that kind of information, and I could imagine that we find a way how to nurture the fonts in use typeface pages that are pretty new right now and is starting to get more information. So if we either link it to there or pull the information from there, that would of course be super cool. Chris, note that down.
There is an ATypI typeface
Oh, there is.
to many people. It's been moribund for a very long time. It's housed at St Bride's Library in London. And the idea behind it was that the people with authority to claim typefaces, designers, producers would compile. We had a form, a printed form, information had to be filled out for every typeface. It was vetted by someone, I can't remember exactly who, and it's deposited at St. Bride's. Of course it's out of date, but it does have this advantage of authenticity, that people put their names on the thing. So at some point, you might like to go there and look through this. There might be some valuable information there.
That's exactly the kind of thing that we're looking to find more of. I mean, once we kind of have everything in a very solid state, essentially what we're going to try to do is fill it with as much information as we can. Like, I'd like to have all of the McGrew book in there in a way that's easy for me to search, because currently if I'm traveling and I want to look up something in McGrew, I have to call someone who has it and tell them to look it up for me. But yeah, and there's a lot of, I'm sure there's even more stuff than we know about, that if we can have it all in the same context, that'd be great. But I'm very curious about the St. Bride's one. It sounds really interesting.
Hi, this relates back to your desire to make this open and available as possible. What sort of licensing does the data have? Are you hoping to go with some sort of open data license, which would be brilliant? That would be great, because we've done a very similar site for Scripts of the World called ScriptSource, which is also a highly structured, integrated thing. And we found that the licensing issues have been a big deal in terms of the people who contribute the information, because not only do they want to be sure that people who use the site, especially via an API or something like that, aren't abusing that information or that right, but also they want to be open with the data. So I encourage you to be sure you have your licensing in place. Can you tell us what that is?
We haven't really thought a ton about that, to be honest. But there, yeah,
please do.
But there are cases like, again, the McGrew book, we're looking about using that as kind of a test set of data, and there's this kind of interesting distinction of where the copyright for that book ends and where it just becomes kind of factual knowledge. So if you break down the information that's in there into bits and bytes of metadata, it's one thing, but we're not going to, like, you know, copy and paste all the text from the book and just kind of use it verbatim, because that would clearly be violating the copyrights. And I think we'd want to have something where it was clear what we would allow people to do. And generally, I mean, we're not trying to make money off this, so I imagine it'll be probably pretty open.
Yeah, I hope it falls a lot about, under the academic citation rule, maybe. I don't know. But we will probably have to talk about this for images.
I think we'll have to stop here, otherwise we're going to run terribly late. But are you guys going to be around today?
Be around, and I have an internet voucher for the next 24 hours. So whoever wants a demo in private, or just grab us in the hall. Thank you.